Okay, hi everybody, it's a pleasure to be here. As we were introduced, I'm Debbie and this is O'Neill and we work at Saxonica. Hopefully you all know, producing the Saxon processor. So today we're going to be talking about distributing XSLT processing between the client and server. So really we're going to be talking about a project that O'Neill and I have been working on together, which is to do with redesigning an in-house web app that we use for generating the licenses for the commercial product. But before we get on to that actual project and the actual example app that we're redesigning, I'm going to start with a bit of background. So, server versus client processing. Server-side XSLT? Yeah, I think we can do that. There are a number of processors available. And implementing XSLT 2.0 and even 3.0. What about in the client side? So we're talking about browsers mostly. Native support, not so good anymore. So most browsers support XSLT 1.0, but lots of them not even that. In particular, mobile browsers have dropped support for XSLT, boo. However, how about using Saxon.js? So this is an XSLT3 runtime written in pure JavaScript, so it runs in a browser's JavaScript engine, where the support is good for JavaScript. So it runs on compiled stylesheet export files. So you produce these using Saxon normal product, EE, and it produces a compiled form of your stylesheet, which the Saxon.js then processes in the browser. And because you can now do XSLT 3.0 easily in the browser, that means that we can actually talk about distributing processing. So if you've got some app or service or something that does some XSLT 3.0, you can think about moving some of your processing into the browser. So not only does Saxon.js mean you can do XSLT 3.0 in the browser, it also provides a set of extension functions and instructions and modes in XSLT that mean that you can write interactive apps just using XSLT. So you don't need to drop down to JavaScript. You can write some event handling templates so that when you click somewhere on your page, the XSLT processes the action to be taken. And you can dynamically generate parts of your page and add those in. So this interactive XSLT, you'll certainly see as we go through our example and look at the code. It was introduced a few years ago with the precursor to Saxon.js, so Saxon CE. And the uptake was fairly good, I think. So hopefully a number of you have already seen it and maybe even used it and like it. And we've kept the same definitions of instructions and things for Saxon.js. Added a few new things so that it works even better, I guess. Okay. So going back to the main focus of the talk, I guess. So why do we want to move the processing client side? We've got perfectly good server side, but why do we want to? Well, maybe it's going to be nice. It's not just because I want to be able to use Saxon.js. It's because we can look at hopefully improving the speed of the thing and simplifying our application architecture. If we can do everything in XSLT and hopefully be able to get XML end-to-end, so in our current process, passing things through over the HTTP process, maybe it's not in XML or there's some encoding issues going on, but hopefully we can minimize those, cut out those by making the process generally cleaner, smoother, and removing the translation between the different third-party tools that we use. So hopefully sticking just in XSLT. We do retain some server-side processing for our app, and generally you will want to, not the whole thing is going to go client-side. So in particular, of course, you want to maintain the security of sensitive data, and we want to keep our data centralized, so we're storing something from it as well. So a lot is hopefully going to move client-side, but not everything. Okay, I think I'm done already. You've got time. So let's pass over to O'Neill, who's going to actually introduce the app that we're talking about.
Hi. Well, the task that Mike set for us to do was to redesign our in-house license tool. It's just sort of a background of the structure of the tool. We're using XSLT forms as a sort of front end, so the initial email request from any user, we'll copy and paste it into the X form, and then it would populate a sort of a special form with all their details, and we say submit, and it creates a license and send it to the user. On the server side, the servlets would be doing all the hard work of the XSLT to, work out was everything that they entered was correct, and this user, are they requesting more than one evaluation license in a month, those sort of things that would do on the server side. But the interesting thing is how there were sort of issues with that. How can we sort of bring everything sort of client side? Because using third-party applications, there are a number of issues that you face along the way. One of the issues that we faced was the decoding. There was certain names, like with Latin subscripts, or there were problems with that because it would look all mangled in the X forms. And I wrote a blog about this. I spent about a week trying to work out what was going wrong. And XSLT form is encoding it in a certain format. Servlex is thinking that it's in another format, and then things start to go wrong. So we want to try and bring that as much in-house as possible. So let's show you the tool.
So it's still in the browser.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to paste the text. That one there, thank you. So on the website, the user will fill in their details. They want a Saxon EE license, and they'll put in all their details into the form, and this is what we get in the email.
So back from the shop.
Yeah.
So if someone's purchased something, it comes back as structured text.
So we take that text, paste it in there, and this is the X form manual edit form. So it's taken all the details and constructed a nice XML document in the background, and then populated it into the input boxes. So we can say who's dealing with that license, the date when we want the license to be activated from, the upgrade days, how long the license should work for, the number of products that they actually purchase. So that they're asking for an EE1 license, quantity 1, 2 quantities of the second license. Sorry, the table is headers are sort of moved to the left a little bit. Still a prototype. So if we submit that, what's happened there is that request as XML has been sent to Servlex, and in the background it's creating the license and send it to the user. So they're part of this which we haven't yet done. It's a prototype. So we have the XForms implementation what we've done in XLT, which I'll come on to shortly. We still have the servlets in the background, but it's doing less of the work. That was the main thing. So on the servlet side, all we want to do is just to create the license and send it to the user. Okay. Huh.
Yeah, that's it. Just go back to that one, I think.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so let me show you the flow diagram, which sort of illustrates the flow of data, what's going on in this new application. And it's a shame we haven't got in the paper there's a flow diagram for the old system, but this is just for the new system. If you see, this is sort of top heavy. Most of the work is happening in the client side. That's what the aim is. So the first layer here is all the interactions from the user. They load the app, we have the display form, and then they input the text. And the XLT on the client side parses that license into XML. We validate that on the client side. And what we have then is an edit form, which then can be, we make a HTTP request. Now, we mentioned here that it's a JavaScript extension. This diagram is a little bit old because since we wrote the paper, we've been working on this, and now we have the HTTP request happening in Saxon.js, which Debbie will come on to later. So on the server side, all that we want to do is just to send the license to the user, and also to store the licenses on the server. So you still need the server, but we're trying to bring most of the work that we have to do on the client side. So now let's sort of talk about these new developments. So we've implemented XForms and also some work on the HTTP, which Debbie will come on to. So what have we done? We've replaced the use of XLT forms. Reason why, it's limited to XLT 1.0 because it works in the browser. And we had some serious decoding issues, and it's embarrassing when you're sending a license to a user with their name all come in strange, it was strange characters. So there were some serious issues there. So it's important to sort of bring it in-house and have control of from full end to end what's going on. So the internals of the XForms implementation, it's implemented using XLT 3.0, runs in the browser through Saxon.js. The XForms model, instance, and form controls, same as you would expect with XLT forms. It's written as an XML document. But the actual events are handled using interactive XLT 3.0. Another thing which I'll show you shortly is the instant data to sort of control let me show you this. I think the best thing is to show you what I'm talking about here. So that data in the form is actually stored as some JSON on the page. And that's done purely for validation purposes. So if the user wants to change something, there has to be some binding going on. There has to be some validation going on. So it's important to store the instance data on the page. And also when you submit, you want to do some validation at that point as well. The usual thing that you'll expect in XForms. Now, this is just for illustration purposes. This is not a part of the application, but this is the data that's stored on the form. and then the XML format of that. So now let's show you the Xform style sheet. So the main template is, here we have, so we allow the document to be passed in as a parameter. The instance also can be passed in as a parameter, and also where you want that form to be put on the page. Use an ID. Okay. It's important to read all the bindings that's associated with the Xforms, and we'll do that as a map. And also the submissions that you would expect on Xforms, we want to keep track of that as well as a variable. And then the result document will generate the Xforms on the page. So what it's doing, it's essentially building a HTML form. So it's taking the Xform dialect and constructing some HTML form, like the input boxes and things like that on the page. So let's look at some of the parts of that. For example, the Xform input. So again, we have to keep the instance, as we sort of go through the style sheet, we have to keep passing on the instance and the bindings to when we want to populate something. So here there's a match on the input, and we should expect a ref attribute. And what we do, we use Excel evaluate to work out what should be put into that input box. Also, if there's anything else, like for example, if this input box should be, if it's a required field, we need to put something in that input box to say, yes, that this data is important, that it should be filled in. I could go through the whole model, like things like the repeat, things like that, but you get the general idea. The thing is, I was using XSLT forms as sort of a baseline to sort of understand what we need to do, and I thought, well, let's utilize XSLT 3.0, Interact XSLT 0 to do some of the interesting things to make things better, and it proves useful. Let's show you the events, how we do that. So, no, not that one. Now, as I said, this is still a prototype. So, if I click on an input box, something should happen. You know, there should be some validation. So the mechanism is there. If I click on the input box, do something. Yeah. One that I have completed is if you click on a button, we see here the mode which matches the on-click event. We grab the instance XML. Well, we grab the instance, which is a JSON object, remember, from the form, and run it through a function to convert that JSON to XML, and now we have the XML back. The other thing is, we have the original instance, but we also need to get the updates that the users entered on the form. So we sort of run through a check to see if there's anything's changed. And if something's changed, then we need to update the instance XML. And there's various validation bits that we need to do. Check if the fields are required, if it's empty, that sort of thing. And then we need to do the HTTP request. Now, the thing about this template rule, because we can use that XSLT forms within our application, you can also override some of these template rules. Like for the button, Debbie, I'm probably stepping on what Debbie's going to be doing here. Where's the button? Yeah, so we just override what that particular template rule here. So you can do some things more than this sort of default general implementation that I've got in the XSLT forms. So just to highlight the benefits of implementing the XSLT forms, it maintains our XML to XML processing, better support on the mobile devices. Now that's a problem with XSLT forms. It works great in most browsers, but you find users come back and say, wait a minute, this form is all XML I'm seeing here, I'm not seeing the form. So because we've implemented that using Saxon.js, it should work on most browsers that support JavaScript. XSLT 3.0, that's a big win. And better integration into the whole license tool, that's important. So we're not having to have 3 different third-party tools. We're just relying on our own and also one other servlets. Back to you, Debbie.
Thanks. Okay. So we're going to, only a little bit touched on some of this, but jumping into a different section, really. So I'm going to talk about the HTTP requests. So as O'Neill briefly mentioned when you were looking at the flow diagram, that's slightly out of date. So there I was saying that we use extension functions, but I'm going to present for you new developments in Saxon.js where we've added a new mechanism which uses the XSL schedule action interactive XSLT instruction. So that already exists, but we've added a new attribute, HTTP request, and it's available with Saxon 9.8 and will be available with the next release of Saxon.js, whenever that comes out. So hopefully soon. So yes, sorry if you haven't seen any interactive XSLT before, and we're not going into depth. This isn't an introductory course. You're seeing it scattered around the place, and we'll probably just be going, oh, what's that bit? But here's another bit. So the XSL schedule action is an instruction to make an asynchronous call to a named template. So asynchronous means that it'll go and do something, and when it comes back, you'll deal with the response. So there are 3 different options. You can either set an attribute that tells you to wait for a certain amount of time, or you can ask to go and fetch a document, and the named template will only fire once that document comes back. Or we've introduced this new one to say, send an HTTP request, and when you get the response back, take that and then go and handle it with your contained name template. So it will look, in your style sheet, it will look a bit like this. So this object here that I'm passing into the attribute is a map defining, so an xbar31 map defining the HTTP request. And then when it comes back, when you get a response, I'll then go and call this other named template, HTTP submit, which will do something. We wondered about implementing the XPath HTTP client module. So that defines a extension function for sending HTTP requests, but it's synchronous rather than asynchronous. And we want to stick to asynchronous because it's generally considered better practice. And in that module, they also define a way of specifying your HTTP request. So all its headers and the content and things in XML. But instead, we think it's more convenient to supply it as a map. And we can now use maps because we've got XPath 1, so XPath 3.1. So let's use that. So yeah, as I said, the call template then handles the response, and I'm going to return the response as another map. So let's go and look at that. What do we do? Yeah. Escape. And is it the same place or is it not the same place? So that's where you actually click the button. Can I follow it from there? And I've got a slightly different template, so I'm not sure quite how that one looks to that one. Is that called? Anyway, it's handled by this template. I guess that, I don't know. Anyway, so this is the template that's going to handle it. And down here, I'm building my variable, which is a map. So these pairs are the things that you need for an HTTP request. So it has its headers and content and things. That's where the client module became very useful because it helped me learn what you need to have and what's there, so what I need to implement. So I'm going to specify the body for the request, which is the XML instance document that O'Neill built, or the Xforms did. I'm going to send a post request, and that's where I'm going to send it to. So this is the servlex server-side handling to a specific template on that side, and I'm sending it as XML. Then Oxygen is usefully highlighting the new thing, so it doesn't know about HTTP request attribute yet. So I'm sending that map, and I'm going to go to that template when the response comes back. So my response comes back as a map. We return it to this template as the context item. So then I get the so the map is key value pairs. So get it from the key body, which in the response map should actually be the XML content of the response, and then process that on a different template called order received. And then in this template, so from my XML response, whatever I've built on the server side, I know it to be a thing that I can find the customer name and the customer email on it. I build a little bit of HTML, and I'm going to put it in my page using this part. So it's using the result document with the method IXSL replace content. And so that's telling me where in my page to put it. This is saying replace the content there. And that's the bit where you actually get the response back. So after submitting, finally, we do the communication with the server side, and it comes back just with a little message at the moment. So no license is really being generated. It's just building a message, pretending that you have. Okay. I think that's all I was going to say about that. So hopefully it gives an idea of how it's going to work. There's a bit more work to be done to finalise it. And I would be interested to talk to other people that have done HTTP requests to make sure that I'm really building it the right way and sending the right things and have got everything covered, because as well as post requests you can send things and who knows what else, so make sure I can do everything. So in conclusion, hopefully we've showed that yes, it is worthwhile moving parts of processing client side. We have shown how we can do it, or at least working towards how we can do it. As we've said, this isn't a complete application yet. We're a long way into the redesign. We're excited by the fact that there is lots that we can do and have managed to get working, and it should be useful for other people as well. So we've managed to use interactive XSLT 3.0 to do a lot. So we've the redesign the redesign, it was necessary to implement a new prototype of XForms, which has gone a long way. I'm not sure if O'Neill actually wants to do a full implementation, so
well,
maybe he wants other people to get involved.
Yeah, the thing is, it's on my agenda to move what I've done, like the style sheet, and put it on GitHub, and hopefully get some other people interested to contribute, so we have a full implementation. That would be nice. Yeah.
And then everyone can use it. It was a very useful project to work on, because we don't get much chance to actually write XSLT or play with the tools that we make. So this was, test them in a real life situation. So it was really useful. For ages we've been thinking we want to be able to do HTTP using interactive XSLT, but we hadn't quite worked it out. But this was a good way to go and force ourselves to go and work it out, because we wanted to do it. So we've come a long way with that. And yeah, all of that we now do client-side in the browser. We entirely skipped over all the parsing and things. There was a bit of work involved in making sure that we did all that early. But yeah, of course there's still some server-side. We're not killing that off entirely, but it's a lot nicer, I think, getting things in the browser. Yeah. And yeah, one of the huge benefits is that although our previous tool probably claimed to be XML end-to-end, there was still some server-side processing that was actually going back to Java, which again we haven't talked about, but we've got rid of that entirely now, or we will do. So it's a lot tidier for us, people that like XML. So thanks very much for listening. Any questions?
I knew you'd have a question.
So this is very exciting, as you can imagine, for me, and good to see. All the HTTP stuff looked like it was just duplicated stuff that's already in XForms. Is that just because you didn't get to that bit of XForms yet, or was there a special reason for not doing it in the XForms way?
Probably because we haven't got to the part of XForms. But the thing about it is, Saxon.js is not only going to use for XForms, so we need to have the HTTP stuff in there as well. So yeah.
Yep.
Have you thought of what the real sweet spots of this technology actually are? Because I'm pro XML, XSLT all the way through, get involved in many projects where trying to help define the architecture. But the bit that you get your hands on least as a content person is the front end. And those guys think XSLT is voodoo, they just open here. And so you really need something you can go, and this will make the big difference, because otherwise they're going to say, oh, I'm going to use JavaScript, we've got frameworks coming out every year, we're going to use JSON for the data, why else would we use something different? Have you any thoughts?
Not exactly. We'd love other people to come along and go, hey, I've written this exciting, cool thing. A number of people have taken it up, but yeah, we don't quite have a way to sell to people that already like JavaScript probably will stick to it. But you can write the XSLT and they don't need to do it anymore.
I can answer that a bit, if I may. So was it last year or the year before that somebody presented a system they'd written for the National Health, that somebody had written where everything was done in Java, I think, and basically the system had completely failed. And there were 70 people working on that. It cost £10 million. And so this one guy picked it up and did it all by himself using essentially this sort of techniques, but I mean a lot of X forms, because it's all declarative. There's much less work. And the front end people have just got to learn that declarative is fantastically time and money saving technology. And that, they haven't learned that yet, but when their managers do, they're going to have to.
Right, well done.